So to get started, I would like to begin with introducing Les Picker. This is our second webinar with Les. We did one back in, I believe it was April, about the secrets to building a successful portfolio, which you can also find in our YouTube channel. So I'll link that in the chat. Les is a professional landscape, wildlife, and travel photographer. He's photographed for National Geographic publications and several other magazines and newspapers. Les offers a ton of workshops, tours, and how-tos on his website with so many helpful tips from editing your work to creating your own floating frames and some really unique ideas on photographing different landscapes and photographing different animals. It's really cool. So I'll also link his website in the chat for anyone to take a look at. So I'm going to pass it on to Les to get started with the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Paige. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, to this webinar. I'm hoping it'll be somewhat informal. So as you have questions, please send them on the chat screen, type them in, and Paige will fire them at me at suitable points during the presentation. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all sort of sheltering in place as best you can. And until this whole COVID mess is over, which couldn't be soon enough for me anyway. So today we're going to be talking about African wildlife, or how I was almost eaten by a lioness who was out hunting. This is really a true story. I'm going to give you the backstory to it. Obviously, I love being outdoors. I love nature, but there's a difference between experiencing these things out in the wild and then committing them to paper, understanding what papers to use, how to best represent your work. That whole process is sort of a transition. So I'd like to walk you through that and with some examples, and again, ask questions as you see fit. So let me move to the screen here and press the play button, and here we are. So we're going to talk about being face-to-face with an African lioness who, by the way, was in full hunting mode, but we'll get to that toward the end of the presentation. And in between, there'll be some other fish stories that I can share with you. My website will be on the in the description page, that area that Paige is establishing for this. So let's get started and talk about this first image. The backstory to this is fairly simple, and then I want to get into the paper, talking about the paper and how we displayed this image. So I was in, for this particular image, I was in South Africa and driving myself through this. Actually, my wife was with me, but it was just the two of us driving through this park. And that's something, by the way, a tip that I would give for those of you who are really into wildlife, particularly African wildlife, is don't necessarily, I mean, it's wonderful to go on a program tour, especially one devoted to photography, particularly, but there are times when you want to allow several days for yourself to self-drive, especially through the South African parks, because they allow that. And so now I don't want to be specific as to what park this is that I drove through in this particular instance, for reasons that'll become apparent fairly soon. But in this park, we were told that they had recently introduced a Kalahari lion. Now, this is an enormous lion. In fact, it's the biggest lion that I have ever seen, and I've been to Africa many times. But it hadn't been seen in almost a month since they introduced it. It had gone into the brush and ostensibly to mate with some of the lionesses there in the park. But it hadn't been seen, and the fear was that it had been poached. So I started out in the morning in my self-drive vehicle, and it was early in the morning, just immediately after sunrise, and went down this dirt road. And as I made this very sharp right-hand turn on my left, there he was, just sitting there, minding his own business, but obviously king of the hill. And I was literally 10 feet away from him at this point. So this shot was actually taken from the front seat, from the driver's seat here. And I reached for my camera, and all I had ready here was my 24-70. So this was taken at probably 50 millimeters, or it might have been full 70. I don't recall right now. But this thing was really, really close to me. And he just sat there, and I had, he eventually walked away, but I had 45 minutes with this magnificent animal, just absolutely perfect in every way, shape, or form. His paws were the size of small dinner plates. To show you how close actually it was, I wanted to do this close-up of his eye. And if you take a look at his eye, you can see my car there. And if you look real close, it's not very clear here, but on a screen you could see it. There's me sticking my head and camera out the window. So sometimes, the photo gods smile upon you, and they give you situations like this. So rather than render it as typically I would do, in my National Geographic days or in other magazine work I've done, you'd do something in color represented. In this case, for reasons, again, that I'll be telling you as we walk through this presentation, I decided to render this in black and white. And here, for example, is a finished print. We decided to do this on Moab Entrada paper, which is a wonderful paper. I mean, I'm not here to plug Moab papers, but I have to tell you that's the papers we use. We've used many, many other kinds of papers over the years, but for the last 5-7 years, we're pretty much exclusively Moab, unless there's some specific need for another paper. But Moab Entrada is a wonderful paper that has good DMAX, wonderful feel to the paper. And we love that. So we decided to not put it behind glass, that we wanted to try to mount these prints with full availability of the paper. We even encourage people to touch it. We think that that tactile element of printing is something that's often overlooked, but is really quite important. So this is a toned print, and something I do want to mention to you, because we think it's important, is that when you tone a print like this, don't leave your borders the pure white of the paper. Now there's Entrada Natural, which has got a slightly off-white look to it, very slight. And then there's Entrada Bright, which is pure white. And that, either way, whatever toning you're using in your image, in this case, this is a toned black and white image, obviously, you want to make sure that your borders are toned also, so there isn't that sharp contrast that really detracts from the image, in our opinion. So this print is mounted to Gator Board, and then mounted onto another sheet of Gator Board that's smaller, so it stands off from what we refer to as an open frame print. And I talk about that in some of my other videos if you go to our YouTube channel. And here we are in the studio, one part of our studio where we're laying it out, getting ready for this to be mounted. And you can see we've sold several of these large images. This is on 44-inch paper, but with the borders, as you can see here and back here, with the frame, the way it's framed, there are 3 inches on each side, so that results in a 50-inch by 50-inch print. And so here it is laid out, coming hot off the press. And again, and you'll probably want to know, we are an exclusive Canon shop. So we have a Canon 44-inch printer, a 24-inch printer, and two 17-inch printers. So the Canon 4000, the Canon ProGraph 2000, and two ProGraph 1000s, which are really our workhorses, because we do all our proof prints first, 8.5 by 11, before we go to final print. And you can see here lying on the table one of the proof prints. So that explains why that is there. Okay. Before I move on, Paige, any questions?
The only question you have is about the camera. So what camera allowed you to print that large?
In this case, I had I was still shooting Nikon, so I believe it was a Nikon 850. It might have been the 810. So I'm not totally sure, but it's the 800 series in Nikon that this was taken with. I'm now a completely Fuji medium format shooter. My artwork has progressed or evolved, I should say, from being primarily an editorial photographer to a fine art photographer. And part of that is driven by my absolute love of printing. I'm blessed by having an assistant. Hold on a second. This is, I have an assistant, Bob Boyer, who is just an expert printer, a master printer. We both love papers. We love good, high quality, fine art prints. Now, one thing I should mention here, Bob just passed me a note, is that this is printed on matte paper. So the need for high pixel density is not as demanding as necessary that you would have for a high gloss paper where every pixel might count. So, but at any event, the amount of detail here is truly extraordinary to the point where in this image here, you can actually, if you look at his lower teeth, you can see distinctly the spittle in his mouth, and every hair, stands out. And again, by the way, I wasn't looking for any kind of depth of field in this. I was just, fortunately, as I shot him, the eyes and the hairs on his jaw were in the same focal plane. So I was able to get crisp definition in his eyes, as well as the hairs being nicely delineated. So I shot this at 5.6, right, an f5.6. All right.
And then Les, you have a few more questions quickly. Okay. Is this print on a single sheet or is it on a roll?
Oh, no, a 44-inch there is no sheet for 44-inch. So this is printed on a roll on a 44-inch wide, a printer that takes 44-inch wide paper. You can take narrower paper, and we do sometimes print 24-inch on the 44-inch printer. But this is 44-inch, comes on a roll, and we do use sheet paper from Moab, 17 by 22, 17 by 25 paper that we do in a sheet format on our Pro 1000 printers. But for 24-inch and for 44-inch, we use a roll.
And then you just have a few questions actually about toning. So I know you mentioned that you use toning with the prints. So can you sum that up really quickly?
Well, I'm not sure how to sum it up, except that any of your post-processing programs, whether it's Lightroom or Capture One, we use both in our studio, Lightroom and Capture One, and Photoshop, of course, allows you toning options. So I can't go into an explanation of exactly how that's done, but I must tell you it's very easy to do. You can make choices for toning. A lot of the programs of the post-processing programs have presets that you can just, with one click, go to a toning option. and then decide the degree to which you want to tone, whether you want it heavily toned or lightly toned. True sepia, which is a tone print. Sepia is just a name for a certain kind of toning. And the key thing here that Bob and I want to emphasize for you is a little bit goes a long way. Please don't overtone. Slight amounts of it really give a very satisfactory look to the print without going overboard. And then you have these horrible looking shadows and weird looking highlights. So, all right, next question.
No, I think we can keep going.
Okay, so let's keep going. I want to change focus for a little bit, and then we'll get back to the lioness that was looking for lunch. I want to talk about trees for a minute. I particularly love trees. Actually, my master's degree is in botany, although not necessarily tree part of botany, but I've always loved trees. Maybe that's a reflection of the fact that I was born and raised in New York City, where we didn't have a whole lot of them. But I love forests, I love trees, but they're a difficult subject to photograph. Those of you who have do photograph out in the natural environment, no, we're not talking about an isolated tree. I drove an hour and a half a couple of weekends ago to specifically to photograph one single tree that is growing on a hill in Pennsylvania. When I got there, it was terrible, and I ended up driving back home. I didn't get the shot, but I love trees, and I'm willing to go out of my way to photograph them. But they're a difficult subject to photograph, especially if they're together in a forest. There is one image that I've taken in Jasper National Park, in a meadow there that I really like, and I've sold many copies of it. But it had mountains in the background and clouds and so on. So it's sort of standalone landscape image. It was taken in the fall, a lot of gold colors, etc. But in an image like this, and it's just, this happened quite by accident, if you will. We've been experimenting over the last few years with a specific paper, and that's the Moab slick rock papers. Now there are two Moab slick rock papers. There's pearl, which is like a pearl paper, very it's glossy, very high Dmax, lots of rich blacks and crisp tones in it. And then there's slick rock silver. Slick rock silver is you have to have the right image in order to print on. And we've been experimenting with different images that seem to work on slick rock. But one day when we were experimenting, we just happened, I don't know why Bob or I got the idea, let's just try this image as an example to see what slick rock can do. And we have, this is our really first test print that came out, and we were stunned by how magnificent it looked on slick rock silver. Now, slick rock silver has literally a gray silver-like base to it. If you looked at it unprocessed, it would look totally gray, the substrate. But when you print on it, it takes up the black so beautifully, and it causes the whites to almost be reflective. There's so much depth in the image that we were taken aback when it came off the printer. When you look at here the Hasselblad in the front, here you can see the chrome, and look at the shadows that the chrome has set on due to the lighting here onto the print. And where it's black, the deep shadows, you can see the gray of how the border looks, how the substrate looks, and where it's reflected the chrome on the camera, you can see it picks up those highlights in the lighter areas. So we were quite taken by it, we really, and it's caused me, particularly since I do so much photography of trees and that sort of landscape, that I'm seriously thinking of doing a project that is entirely trees on Silk Rock silver paper. I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about it. I've got a backlog of images I want to test on this during this COVID time period, and see how it works. But I'm very hopeful about this, and I think we found our niche here with this paper, being able to pick up the highlights and the shadows and the depth, if you will, in this imagery. This is just a quick image. This one had a little bit of a cooler toning to it. We printed it again on larger sheet of Slick Rock, and this was a more neutral image. Frankly, I think I prefer the cooler rendition of it, but this is another example, and I wish the lighting was better when we took this, but we took this very quickly in order to show you what its potential is. All right. So now I want to any questions first before we switch to the next image?
Just one question on Slick Rock Silver. I know a lot of people tend to print black and white images on it. Do you suggest trying, I mean, you showed color here, but do you suggest trying color and black and white, or leaning towards one or the other?
Well, no, I mean, black and white is a natural for this paper. We have some images that we've taken on it with black and white. There's one I took in Yukon territory that is an oil company tried to drill there and abandoned the idea and left 3 huge tanks in the middle of the tundra. Unfortunately, it's an eyesore, but it's in one little restricted area. Nonetheless, I photographed that, so it has a lot of sort of chrome-looking finish to it, but also some deep shadows, and that really renders beautifully on Slick Rock Silver. It actually looks good on Slick Rock Pearl too, but Slick Rock Silver, it really it's almost like magic the way that comes out. So if you have a lot of contrast and tonality in your image, then Slick Rock Silver is something you should experiment with. It's a difficult paper to wrap your hands around, but trust me, it's well worth it. Now, you should know and that we did a case study on it at the ebook website. Those of you, of course, you all know the ebook is free to you, courtesy of Moab. I think that you should avail yourself of that. 163 pages, fully illustrated. But the website itself, where you download that, has a whole section called case studies, and we're going to be beefing that up in the months to come. But in the case study, we did a thing on Slick Rock Silver, how to find images that go with Slick Rock Silver, how to handle them, and we give some examples. I believe Bob did of black and white. Yeah. So take a look at that, and Paige is going to paste the link to that particular case study on this webinar.
Yeah, the link is in the chat for anyone that wants to take a look.
Okay. All right, so let's move on, and I want to talk about this image, which has an incredibly marvelous backstory to it. So I was again in Africa. This is a different national park in Africa, and normally you have to stay in your vehicle, as those of you who've been to Africa know. But I had permission to get out of my vehicle to do some photography when the opportunities presented themselves. I had a guide with me, armed with a rifle, and I was there photographing. To the left of this lioness were 3 giraffes, about maybe 100 yards to the left of this animal. I didn't know it was here, by the way, this lioness, But the giraffes, I was very intent on with my tripod of photographing these giraffes. Marvelous time. And my guide said, I'm just going to go back to the truck and I'll be waiting for you right there, because I was about done. I told him I was about done. He said, okay, I'll go back to the truck. I'll wait for you. Meantime, I finished shooting and I started to feel goosebumps on the back of my neck, like someone was staring at me. And I didn't know what to make of it. And I turned to my right, and there was this spectacular animal stalking me. You can see she's in hunting mode. Her haunches are up, her head is down, and I took my camera off my tripod and I turned around, and this was taken with a 70 to 200 lens at about 135. I managed to get off maybe a half dozen or so shots. The first shot, she was square centered here. It was what I call the money shot. At least I wanted to get something. But then I was able to manipulate just for a few seconds. I don't think the shot sequence here lasted more than 3 seconds. And then I put her off center, and she looked right at me with her eyes. You know, I have a catch light in her eye. I wanted that blurry foreground so that she stood out. And I decided, you know, I'm going to shoot this in black. I'm going to process this in black and white because I wanted drama in the shot. I didn't want to just identify this is Lioness 101 for a biology textbook. I really wanted to have some drama there. I wanted her in the context of the grasslands in which she lives and hunts. So I think that comes through loud and clear. And I wanted to I increase the grain in the image to give it a little bit more grit to it. And then Bob and I were looking at this and some other wildlife images, and we decided, you know, I've got other wildlife images that would benefit from sort of the same treatment. So at any event, with this animal, I was able to back out while, you know, keeping my eyes sort of focused on her. I didn't stare her in the eye, but I just backed out. And when I got to the truck, my driver was shocked once I got in there when I pointed out the lion. So a lot of good my guide was at that point. But anyway, it turned out to be one of those magical experiences, and you know, with a little bit of communication, if you will, with a sentient being. But I'm glad it went no further than that. Similarly, and I want to tie this all together with the lion that you saw, the Kalahari lion that you saw at the beginning. I was in Costa Rica hiking with a group of photographers, and we were hiking on a ridge where to our right it was sort of a flat field, and to our left was intense jungle. I mean, very thick jungle. And we were hiking on a slight rise, so we were walking on an elevated path, if you will. And our guide walked past this animal, this ocelot, and three other photographers in front of me, walked past this animal too. He was not more than 5 feet off the road, off our path, I should say. I spotted him, fortunately, before I got to this point, and we were told we were going to be photographing landscape. So all I had was a 24 to 70 on my camera at that point. And so as I walked past him, or her, not sure, I just turned my camera and got off exactly 3 shots before she darted away into the bush. So here's one of those fortuitous circumstances. But again, we decided after the fact, once we made a decision that we were going to have a show with these black and white printed on, all of them printed, by the way, on Moab Entrada texture. There are 3 entradas. I sort of didn't tell you the whole story earlier. There's Entrada Natural, Entrada Bright, and then Entrada Textured, which only came out a few years ago. The Textured, which we absolutely love. We fell in love with it as soon as it came out. So, so given this, we decided to go back to a bunch of different wildlife images that I'd taken in different continents and different places over the years. And we developed a gallery show, if you will, called Wild Earth Monochrome. And we developed so this is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 images. This was a solo exhibition at a gallery. I'll show you more pictures of that as we go along. But here's what I want to tell you, is that we decided to make all the accessory materials that paired with this gallery show. My prints are not inexpensive, so we wanted to match the marketing with the quality of the prints themselves. So everything you see here was actually printed on the same paper or on one of the Entrada papers, whether it be textured or natural. So everything was there. So on the left, you see, I'll show you another view of it in a moment. You have the gallery card in which the story of each picture was told, my background, and also the pricing of the images are there in the gallery. The gallery catalog. Yeah, the gallery catalog, you would call it. But we also gave out on the right-hand side, you can see everyone who came in would get a 5x7 image taken from the gallery, the images that were on exhibit in the gallery. And on the back was some marketing material, if you will. And there were posters and so on. Everything was done with the same paper that we printed the images on. And it really got a wonderful reception. So let me just give you a little, I'm going to come out of here for a moment now and whoops. And let me go here for a moment to show you, this is what the gallery card actually looks like. It's a fairly substantial, we printed on 13 by 19 paper, right? So it's 13 inches this way. And it opens up to show a thumbnail of each image that is exhibited in the gallery. And then on the back, there were 5 landscape images, again, rendered in black and white on Moab paper. So,
Les, did you print the brochure on the textured or the regular Entrada?
The brochure is printed on Moab Natural.
Got it.
Moab Natural. It was not printed on the textured. We just felt that it worked better in the hand with the normal, if you will, thing. So let me go back to our
and while you do that, someone was asking if you use Entrada or Entrada textured. I know you use both. Is there a way that you decide which one you're going to use? Is it a specific image that you choose it for, or how do you decide if you're using Entrada or Entrada textured?
Well, you know, we have, I believe we have a case study or something on the Moab website where I talk about choosing papers. It's really more in the eye of the beholder and what the artist prefers. I particularly, and I think I'm speaking for Bob also, we particularly like the textured because you have that feel. We sell a lot of our prints that are unframed, where people want them boxed in a portfolio box or whatever. So they actually get that tactile experience. And we find that people really respond well to the texture. But if it's going behind glass, the texture will not matter. So we tend, on images that are going to be behind glass, to use Entrada natural or bright, depending upon. We also use Somerset, Moab Somerset paper. I know another Moab master, Jim Graham, loves using the Somerset, and he's sort of turned us on to it. We like it too, but yeah, it really depends upon, and we do testing. Whoever asked the question, we test a lot. We will try a print on different papers and see what we like. But when we went for this gallery show, which I'm about to show you more, we needed to settle on one particular paper, and in that case, it was the Moab textured. So let's go back here and move along. And so here's an image of taken during the gallery show, during one of the opening nights, to give you an idea. The images mounted to the right, the upper right here, you see it were all 32 inches. Framed, they were 32 inches square. The square ones were. The rectangles, I forget what they were, 36 or I forget what exactly. But you can see people walked around with these catalog under their arms. They would all go home with something that they remember us by. And you might say, okay, there's a cost to that. Of course, you have to pay for the paper and the ink, but you have to consider that in your whatever your pricing equation is. So keep that in mind. Here's another image, and this explains another part of it. Everything was either 32 inches square or I think 40 inches, Bob. The rectangles were approximately 40 images. We had some that were 48 images framed, but the lion, as you can see, we sold right away during that exhibit. That sold immediately on the first night, and we've made several sales of this particular lion. So two of our anchor images, if you will, were the lion and one that I took of a gorilla in Uganda. A really striking image of a gorilla concentrating on something in his hand. So those sold quickly. And then actually the big sellers were the smaller prints, people that, that was their price point that they preferred. And that's something we encourage you to think about. Those of you who are thinking about a gallery show would be to think about what we call your ecosystem. You want to bring people in at all levels, or maybe a young couple that's just furnishing an apartment. You want to be able to bring them in to enjoy your work. And then, of course, you have people who want something huge over their couches or some statement piece. So you want to be able to have that also. Bob, anything that I'm leaving out on that? Okay.
You have a lot of questions about what spray varnish do you spray the front and the back of the paper? How do you protect the prints?
Wonderful question. Okay. I have tested in our studio several years ago. We tested over a dozen different spray fixatives, or in other words, preservatives. I have to tell you totally candidly that there's a lot of garbage out there. Really, really. There are things you have to look for in a spray fixative. If you're going to spray, that is, sometimes you may want to roll your fixative on, particularly with canvases. But let's talk about paper prints. You have spray prints. We have prints that I show in my workshops that actually change the color and the how would I say that the
blacks.
You change the blacks in the print.
The blacks milky.
Yeah,
not transparent.
It makes the blacks muddy and yucky. It actually literally soaks in and does that. We only found two sprays that we depend on, one of which we depend on totally, and obviously Moab Desert Spray is one of them. It is and the other one, by the way, is Print Shield. Print Shield and Moab Desert Spray. I would not let anything else touch my prints. I have to tell you that. I won't mention names, but there is some real horrible sprays out there that after all your work will ruin your print and the last thing. We always double spray our prints. What does that mean? There's always a question about that. You spray one way and then you rotate the print 90 degrees and spray the other way. That is one coat. So you turn it again and spray it, turn it again and spray it. That's 2 coats, 4 coverage. It's only 4 minutes it takes between coats, so we're not talking about a lot of time. If I'm spraying a bunch of prints, I put 3 or 4 against the background that I'm spraying against and do them all at once. Now, the other thing you have to be careful of with spraying your prints is what's known as spitting. If the spray nozzles are not made to extreme tolerances, which Print Shield and Moab Desert Spray are, the spray will sometimes spit out globs, and if that happens, your print is ruined. There's no way you can salvage a print if it has that spitting occurs on it. Which brings up the other point, and I've seen this on the internet. People spraying their prints while the prints are laying down on a table. Never, ever do that. Always spray your prints in vertical position. Put them up against a board. I put it against these huge pieces of cardboard and spray them that way. Do not spray facing down. You're just encouraging.
I think you put
problem.
something up on the site,
Yes.
and maybe Moab site too.
Yeah. We have a video that we posted on that, and so you can go to my YouTube channel or go to the Moab site, and I think we've done something there too. So does that answer the question? I'm assuming it does with spray fixatives. It's worth going for quality on this. Don't go for these sale items that it will result in terrible, egregious errors to your print.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, then, and like I said, I have a video. It's just a 1-minute video just showing you the technique. The other thing is you should not spray moving your wrist, because then that puts more spray in the center than it does on the edges, if you think about it. So we always recommend just go straight across, maybe grab your wrist so you don't put any twist into it, and do your spraying straight across. All right. It's something you would get used to as you go through this. So that's one other thing. I want to make one last point here that I neglected to mention when we were talking about the Slick Rock Silver, and that is this. I get asked often, well, how do you choose a paper? And the answer is complicated, but the fact is that you start with an image that you love, and you say, how do I want this to look on paper? Do I want a matte paper? Do I want a semi-gloss, a satin look to it? Or do I want a glossy look, like maybe you're shooting some balloons at a circus or whatever, and you want a really high density, very colorful print? You might go to a high gloss paper like Moab Slick Rock Pearl, for example. So you start with your image that dictates the paper. Slick Rock Silver was the exception to that for us. We started with the paper, and it gave us the feedback. It's like the paper told us, you've got to be looking at these qualities. So now I'm going out and either photographing for something that will work on my Slick Rock Silver, because it's a paper not to be missed, not to be trifled with, or I'm looking in my catalog of images on my computer and finding images that are suitable for that paper. So it's like turning the equation on its head, right? So I just wanted to mention that there are times when that the paper will dictate your what you will put on it. It's sort of telling you that. Okay.
Great.
Uh,
So
I'll-
we have a little bit more time. I'm going to kind of go back a little bit and get through some of these questions that we had. Is that
Good.
okay?
all right.
Okay. So do you have any suggestions to help maintain shadow detail when printing black and white on Entrada rag?
For maintaining shadows,
Yes.
Detail.
yeah, maintaining detail in the image. Bob, do you want to say something about it? I mean,
Yeah, turn your screen down.
yeah. So yeah, we get. Let me start with that. We get asked a lot about this. One of the things is that people start with, we're used to our monitors being hugely bright and blasting out color with so many lumens that it's absurd, really. We're talking about a factor of 1200, 1500 even on some of these monitors. Paper is not transmitted light, it is reflected light. And therefore 100-to-1 contrast ratio is the typical thing for paper versus 1200-to-1, 1500-to-1 for a monitor. So if you have your monitor turned up at its maximum brightness, you're seeing everything. Wow, everything looks terrific. But then when you go to print, everything looks dark and it doesn't seem to work. It's so different than what you saw on your monitor. So there are two things we always advise people in our workshops. One is turn down your monitor. It should be no more than half of its that your brightness scale. When you go to ready your image for printing itself, that will give you a much more realistic representation of what your print will look like, and then you can work with the shadows and get the results that will actually appear on the paper. But there's a second issue that I think is far more important, and that is prints are different than a monitor, than a screen. It's a whole different art form, folks. Prints are the yardstick by which photography has been measured since day one, before we had monitors. So you have to appreciate a good print. You have to appreciate the subtlety. You have to appreciate the tonality. You have to appreciate the tactile aspects of it. You have to appreciate matte papers versus semi-gloss or glossy papers. It's a different medium, and you can't expect it to look like what it's going to look like on the monitor. They're just plain different.
Graduated neutral densities.
Yeah, that's another.
And
That's right.
exposed properly.
That's right. So Bob is chiming in from the back. Also, is that when I go out and photograph, I use graduated neutral density filters, because that gives me a tonal balance that allows me in my printing to really get good saturated blacks and have highlights that are not blown out. That gives you a head start in the post-processing process, and allows you to get to prints where you can really have those blacks be nice and black and saturated. You see? So yeah, neutral density
while maintaining shadow detail.
Yeah. You want detail in your shadows, obviously. Okay.
Great.
Next question.
For the lioness photo, how did you create the jagged border?
Okay. So let me just get to there. Let's see. For the lioness photo, how do you get the jagged borders? So that is actually a preset in Lightroom.
Silver Effects Pro.
I'm sorry, Silver Effects Pro. We don't really use Nik software anymore, but we do retain that. Silver Effects Pro, which is part of the Nik software package, allows you to choose from a huge multitude of borders. This is just one example of it. So that's actually printed in with the print. It's not added later. It's a jagged border that we used with this particular print.
Great.
Well, you notice we used it here too, but since there's so much black around it, you can hardly see it. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner of this print, you can see that we used the same border there.
Perfect. And how do you mount your photos to Gator Board?
Oh, good question. So I have do we have a video that we did yet? Or that's on the list, yeah. I think. Okay.
It's on your YouTube channel.
Okay, on my YouTube channel, there is a video that I did on mounting to Gator Board. We're going to actually redo it coming up soon, but yeah, it's fairly simple. There are different ways, different methods depending upon what material you own or what you're willing to spend. So check that out on how to mount a Gator Board. Now, one thing we want to make clear, so I don't get complaints later. We're talking about Gator Board. It is a trademarked item, not foam board. Foam board, folks, warps. No matter what it looks like when it comes out of the store, when you hang it, when you mount a print to it and hang it, it's going to warp. Just by the nature of humidity in the house and sunlight and cold weather and warm weather, etc. Gator Board does not warp. So you must use Gator Board, not other things. And Gator Board comes in a variety of thicknesses from a 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, inch and a quarter, inch and a half thick. I think they are nowadays even making a 2-inch thick one, but I'm not, don't hold me to that. So you can generate a lot of good effects with it. There are many ways to use Gator Board, and I'm going to be doing a video coming up fairly soon on how to create this actual mounting system, an open frame using Gator Board as the substrate to attach your print to. It's a little bit more complex than it initially looks, but we've got it down to a system. It looks wonderful on the wall. There's no light introducing, no glass introducing glare. You can actually, since we double spray it with Moab Desert Spray, we have no problem with people going over and touching it. So in fact, we encourage that because we love them to feel the paper. So yeah, that's what I would say with the Gator Board.
I've given the 2 short answers. The 2 ways that you've mounted it, and it depends. 1, the spray fixative, which is difficult. 2, the water-based roll-on that's actually a coating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So there are oftentimes, Bob points out, for our larger prints, we and all our canvases, we use a roll-on fixative that works very well. It doesn't at all interfere with the look of the print. And that, if you'll go again, we did a 2-part video on that you might enjoy seeing on our YouTube channel.
And last but not least, one lighter paper is easier to mount than heavier paper.
Ah, yes. Bob brings up another point. I'm so glad that he stayed here today for this. Paper comes in different weights. It's measured by what's called GSM. So that's grams per square inch. A meter, I'm sorry, GSM, square meter, sorry. Moab makes papers, ranging, let's say, from maybe 180, 190 GSM, which is a lighter paper, to 300 GSM or 305 GSM even, which is a very heavy paper. So if you're going to mount on Gator Board, for example, there's no point really having to print on 300 GSM because the print's going to be mounted. So you might as well do it at 190 GSM, which will cost you less money also, They'll use the same amount of ink, but why not save a little bit if you're going to mount it? The other issue is, I have to tell you that 190 GSM is a lot easier to handle when you go to mount it onto Gator Board. And by the way, if you do mount on Gator Board, certainly for the first several times you do it, you need 2 people, especially for a larger print. 8.5 by 11, no, you can do that yourself. But even when you get to 13 by 19, you're going to want to have, especially like I said, when you're first learning how to do this, you're going to want to have 2 people to get it down on the Gator Board properly if you're not dry mounting it. If you're dry mounting it, you can do it all by yourself. But if you're using any kind of adhesive, then you're going to need someone to help you position it on the Gator Board so it doesn't get all messed up. Okay.
Great. Someone is asking, do you still spray your prints if you're going to frame it with glass? No,
I don't. That's a good question. If it's going to be behind glass, I generally will not spray it. Now, I say that in general because if it's going to be in a high stress situation, like for example, I know the people who are going to want this in their living room have no way to control the sunlight hitting it. Sunlight's the enemy of all prints, right? UV rays. They're not friendly to prints. So I feel that doing a double coating extra behind the glass can't hurt it and might actually help. Just give it a little bit more protection because the spray does give a little bit of UV protection. However, typically, I would not if it's going to be behind glass or plexi.
Great. And we're just going to get to a few more questions here. If you're hand making a book like the pamphlets that you had for your gallery that people are touching a lot, do you spray those and do you spray the entire thing?
No. If these are handouts that are going to happen, and don't forget, we're printing them in bulk. I mean, we needed, the galleries have a good flow through in traffic. You're going to need 100 copies of it, let's say. I'm not going to go spraying all 100 copies, both sides. By the way, the marketing material we did was double-sided paper, whereas, a print, you can just print on one side, of course. But an exhibition print, that is. So no, I don't spray it if it's going to be marketing material.
Great. And this is actually a question that we get very often, but do you use a rice paper or anything else as a separation sheet for storage or shipping?
Yes, we do. This is a situational answer. First of all, I do want to mention something. Speaking of rice paper, Moab makes a paper, Unrio. It's called Unrio paper from which is a Japanese paper with embedded plant fibers in it. All I can say is the most spectacular, luscious, most amazing paper. You've got to have the right image for it. We printed an image that was on display at Photo Plus. We did for Moab, a big size image. So if you can find the right image, it's absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, getting back to shipping, when we do our prints, if we're doing a portfolio, then we separate it with a very special kind of vellum that we get, we buy from Mohawk Papers. So we'll separate with vellum. When we ship, then we wrap in a tissue paper that affords it the protection that we would want.
Most of our work's mounted anyway.
Do what?
Most of our work's shipped already mounted.
Yeah, that's right. As Bob pointed out, most of our work is shipped mounted, but we do get requests for. We just fulfilled a request for a woman who wanted to get the framing herself, so we packaged it in a tube and protected it with tissue paper.
Great. Okay, I think that is all that we really have time for today. But thank you so much, Les and Bob. Some people were asking who Bob was.
Bob has been working with me for 12 years now. We are he's the truly the master printer. We test products for Moab. They value his opinion also. And he's an artist in his own right, does studio photography also. So I feel very, very happy and blessed to have Bob, working with me. I'll come back from a trip. He'll take a look at some of my images and say, "Hey, that's absolute crap," or else he'll say, "This is a great image. Let's take it to print." So yeah, so so that's who Bob is, and he's an integral part of our studio here.
Perfect. Well, if anyone has any questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email us, and we'll just bother Les to get the answers for you.
Absolutely.
And
we love printing. We're happy to share with people. So if you have questions, fire them away.
Someday we'll have a printing workshop again.
Yeah. We offer, if I can make a plug page for a second here, we offer fine art print workshop 3 and 4 times a year here, but we have been able to do that since January. So at some point we'll be back at it, and just look at our website and see when we post for that. We also do a portfolio workshop, and then I also lead photo trips throughout the world to really capture some wonderful images. Thanks for listening, folks.